Another recent Digino Gaming video, it was a kind of a recap of those old James Turner tweets where he detailed all sorts of information. And then one of the most striking things for me was kind of the inclusion or the omission that, like, typically with a new Pokemon generation, they typically have like up to, I think it was like up to 300 possible designs that get scrapped. Maybe just ideas. They might not be finalized designs, but that makes sense. I would imagine a lot of those designs, those creatures, are kind of reiterative and get kind of cycled over into the next generation if they get scrapped. And we have seen that with a lot of beta Pokemon going back to Generation 1, that those show up in Gens 3, 4, 5 later on down the line. But I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, because what James Turner is talking about in those tweets that you guys talk about is actually in Generation 8, right, which is really recent.
Well, I'll just real quickly, I'll say, like for Gen 2, they made 300 Pokemon, and only went with 100. I think in general, and then they said the same for Gen 8. It seems like they always make around 300 or triple or so, approximately what they ended up using. And based on, there's interview here and they're worded differently, but it seems like generally there was at least like sketches and, maybe what do they call it? The design sheet or whatever. It's the wrong like terminology.
Concept art.
Like a concept art kind of a thing for, let's say 300 of them. And then they ended up going with, like 100 or so, depending on, well, we don't really need 2 rabbits. Okay, well, like we need to fill this sort of beach area, and so we need sort of like beach relevant Pokemon. And
that's some of my favorite kind of, I guess, beta or creation stories, is the ones where like this game needed this, so we made it. Like I remember, and I don't know if this was your discovery or what, but I learned about this from your posts. The thing with Bassel, how they were like, we need more water types, and they made a Bassel, and then they were like, make 2 forms so it looks like we have more water types. And then the funny thing about that is now genuinely one of my favorite Pokemon designs ever is Bassel Legion from Legends Arceus. So to think that may not, that probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for someone going, we need more water types, just make a random fish and split it into 2 forms. I love that.
Yeah, I think they
reused... that was in those Gen 5 Nintendo Dream magazines. They were still like, we need some water. Let's just do like a standard fish, and let's make 2 of them because we're short on water types.
Right.
And Basculin was a pretty forgivable Pokemon, I guess, until you're right, until Legends Arceus, and you got Bassel Legion. Yeah, so we can move on to the James Turner stuff, but so I think they. Like the most fun thing, the best thing that can happen, whether it's from like a leak, a hack, sometimes like someone like Tsunekazu Ishihara will reveal him himself, is like when those sprites or those concept art or whatever of those like rejected Pokemon somehow one way or another make their way onto the internet, and you're like, oh, there could have been a kangaroo ghost or whatever.
That's sick.
Especially when there's like 30 or 40 of them or whatever. But as far as James Turner, so it was like Gen 6 and 7 really more than it was 8. I threw it into that Sword and Shield video because I needed Sword and Shield stuff, so I kind of lumped it all in there. But he, for anyone unfamiliar, James Turner was art director on Sword and Shield, but he he started working on the mainline Pokemon games in Gen 5. Prior to that, he worked on the Genius Sonority games, Pokemon XD, like Gale of Darkness, and I think Coliseum as well. I could be wrong about that. I know he worked on XD, but Gale of Darkness, the sequel. And I think also Pokemon Trozai, something like that.
Sure,
Yep.
Some of the spin-offs. And according to him, he's the only person who's worked both on those spin-offs and on the mainline games. So he kind of worked his way up from the spin-offs to a Pokemon designer to art director for Sword and Shield. Now he's left to do the Plucky Squire. But so anyway, he made his Twitter account in, I forget, something like 2015, 16, something like that. And for a long time he only had like 100 followers or whatever, and so he was saying stuff out into the ether that was getting like 2 likes, 3 likes, and I guess eventually, so yeah, at one point, I think in 2019, I went through every tweet he'd ever made and just kind of like copy pasted the interesting stuff. Like he'd said, like, I'm going to pronounce all the Pokemon names wrong. Naganadel
Close enough.
was basically said he was based on the Xenomorph from the Alien movies. And that who's that big fat Guzzlord was partly inspired by Agrajag from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and that a snow cone Pokemon from Gen 5 who he made were inspired by the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters, as well as by Weezing. So it was sort of, it's like because the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man Ghostbusters takes place in New York, and it's based on New York. So stuff like that, and also stuff about sort of some behind the scenes, like someone was like, "Oh, do you name your Pokemon?" He's like, "Oh no, there's like an official name rater here who names all the Pokemon, and there's someone else who comes up with the lore. Like we suggest names and lore, but there's like an expert for that." And so just kind of stuff about like how the office works and like where he got Pokemon ideas from, and like how they pick the shiny colors and stuff like that. So I copy pasted that, and like I started quoting him. I wasn't just like quote retweeting. I'd like take the interesting bits of what he said, like I say with the way I do Twitter, it's like I'll have like a cool image with the quote, and then like his picture of the person being quoted in the corner. Then after I did like one or two of those, within like 24 hours, he'd gone through and deleted like 96 tweets from his Twitter history, including all the ones I'd copy pasted, and plus I think some more which I had not bothered to take down because I didn't think they were interesting. But so I took from that someone around the office was like, "Dude, what? You're not supposed to be saying this shit."
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We had to delete it. Unfortunately, I had it all copy pasted at that point. But yeah, there's some interesting, like I said, the Stay Puft, basically where he got the ideas for a lot of his Pokemon and other things just sort of around the office. And I'd asked if I could interview him. He said he would like to. This was years ago. He said he would like to, but that any interview has to be approved by corporate, basically. And I've spoken to other people as well who said, like, Pokemon head office has to approve any interview, or I can't talk to you. I could lose my job. And so they're locked down super tight. That Retro Studios is also owned by Nintendo, 100%. And I've gotten design documents, I've gotten footage out of those guys, lots of interviews and stuff for Zelda games and Metroid games and other stuff. But like the Pokemon people, they put the fear of God into their folks, because that, like, I have asked hundreds of people who've worked on Pokemon games, and like only a few of them even responded, and the ones who did were just said what I just said to you, which is like, we can get approved by head office, and let me tell you right now, it is not going to happen unless you're IGN or Game Informer. I was like, okay,
all right,
yeah.
How would that work with like for example, James Turner has now left the Pokemon company? Would that still because I imagine he still has probably NDAs and stuff.
Would that prevent him from like sharing more information like that in the future?
Contractually, I don't know. I've been thinking about asking him. I didn't want to do it like as soon as you.
Yeah, make your return to YouTube with that.
But I do know there are people who've left Nintendo. I don't want to use this guy's name, but there was a guy who worked for Nintendo for a long time. Starting in the 90s, and he left a long time ago too, but he was pretty high up, and I was in a conversation with him. Basically he had shared, I'll just say, an image soon before we spoke, and I was later told that someone from Nintendo called and threatened the lives of his family. Something to do with threatening to drown in a swimming pool.
What?
And to not ever do that again. Don't ever share an image from the 90s that was basically cut content.
Yeah. So he shared it with you?
So what I'm hearing is the Nintendo ninjas are real?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what you're hearing.
I don't think that was a lawyer. I think that was like some sort of executive of some sort. But I mean, basically, that even if people who've already left, there's a fear of getting sued, which is something I hear a lot. And there have been issues of people who I have interviewed for Did You Know Gaming who've gotten into legal trouble for talking to me, which that's a whole nother thing we don't need to get into right now. But
For talking with you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like someone talked to me and I quoted them in a video, and then they got into legal trouble. You know, they had to end up getting lawyers and after they got in trouble with Nintendo's lawyers, basically they had to get their own lawyer and the whole thing. It's happened more than once.
Yeah.
I feel bad about it, but we don't need to get into all that.
I believe it though.
So there's a fear of getting sued. There's also the fear of getting blackballed, which is someone who's still in the industry, even if they're not working for Nintendo. I have been told from other people, like, well, my fear is that my company at some point will want to work in some capacity with Nintendo, and they'll say, well, we're not going to work with you while you've got that guy under your employ.
That sucks.
Now they're concerned for people who won't want to talk, and then there's also just the matter of a lot of them just want to keep that option open. They don't want to, maybe someday I want to go back to Nintendo or something like that. And if I do an interview that they wouldn't like, then that door's shut, and it's not worth. I can talk to some YouTube channel and therefore like limit my career possibilities. And so